This is a Lamborghini Gallardo, the very car that drove fear into the heart of Ferrari. Today, I'm going to take you through all the common problems that can occur when you buy a used example. And where we begin here, guys, is at the front. Now, in 2003, 2004, the early cars weren't provided with front-end lifts. It was an optional extra on later cars. So if the car that you're looking at doesn't have one, be sure to check under this bumper. Make sure there's no deep gouges, bad scratches, because that three-stage paint is not cheap to fix and really hard to match. Now, moving to our first corner here, guys, two things for you to check. First up, tyre wear. We can check the alignment by making sure that the tyre wear is fairly symmetrical on each side. Second thing I want to mention here, guys, is that the Gallardo is really sensitive to aftermarket wheels. If we change the rolling diameter front to rear, it can sometimes wreak havoc with the differentials in the car. So more on that later as to how we can check that the diffs are okay. Now, before we get on to this next check, guys, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so that you're alerted when we make a new upload if you want to see more buyer's guides and reviews of cars just like this. Now, when it comes to the rear of the Gallardo you're looking at, guys, we want to have a good check over for any heat damage that might be occurring. The exhaust sits right behind this section here, so you can imagine that the heat generation is pretty significant. First, we want to check the tail lights, guys. Look for any fine hairline cracks that might be occurring. Second, this panel on the rear here where the Lamborghini badge is affixed. If it's really bad, it can sometimes bevel or dimple to the point that the Lamborghini badge is actually warping or maybe even falling off a little bit. Basically, have a good, thorough check for anything that doesn't look right on the rear. This particular car is really nice. Next part, guys, the bit that none of us really like when we're viewing a used car, but it is necessary to do. We want to get down and we want to have a check underneath. Obviously, we've got the engine sat just in front of the rear wheels and we've got the gearbox behind that. And what we're looking to do is make sure that we don't have any oil stains. In particular, we want to check around the oil sump. Make sure there's not an excess of oil anywhere. Now, one failure point in particular I'd like to mention is the rear main seal. Just like Ferraris of this era, they've been known to dry up and start to leak. Generally speaking, this is in the area where the gearbox meets the engine. Now, if you are getting a little bit of oil in that area, it is not the end of the world, guys. It is fairly common. I had a Ferrari 360 for around about a year and it had a slight leak. When you do the clutch next on the car, which you inevitably will at some point, go ahead and change it at that point, as long as the leak isn't too substantial. Now, obviously, guys, a really common modification to make is to swap out the exhaust on the Gallardo. However, be aware that some setups can be extremely noisy, like this car, which has straight soul pipes on it. Make sure the modification that's been done to the exhaust is what you want. Now, one other area I'd like to highlight here is the catalytic converters, or CATs, in these cars. They have been known to fail on early cars, and when they do, it can be really bad. It sends a fine sandy-like texture back through the engine, and obviously that can result in engine failure. So any warning lights relating to the CATs on the dash or exhaust system, you definitely want to take them into account. Something else to add, guys, if you want to follow this car and get regular updates and see what the owner's doing with it, be sure to follow him on Instagram. It's as the plate is, so V10, oh yeah. Give it a follow. Try and get a good look at the car under natural daylight or nice lighting like we have in this garage here. Run your fingers along the door shuts and just generally make sure that all the panel gaps are as you would expect. This is an obvious one, but go ahead and check the overall condition. Check the steering wheel, check the seats, check the bolsters in particular. Anyone who's spent some time looking on eBay or AutoTrader or whatever else knows that the interiors can sometimes show a little bit more wear than the average car. Next, guys, it's time to start the car up. But when you do, there's a few things that I would advise you to check in quite quick succession after the car has started. Number one is when it starts, have a listen to the starter motor. It should immediately shut off once the engine is running. If it catches and hangs too long, then that's a faulty starter motor and it's probably going to eventually burn itself out. Now, once the car settles down to a steady idle, guys, not a cold start, one of the things that you can check is the oil pressure. Ensure that when the car is idling, it doesn't drop below 1 bar of pressure. Now, this next part, guys, I would show you with the engine running, but this car is so loud that you wouldn't be able to hear me. So in your case, the engine should be running. In my case, engine off. And what you need to do is, with the car in a steady idle, go ahead and start hitting some buttons. Try the hazard lights, try the air conditioning, try the audio system. And what we're looking to do here is identify any bad grounds that the Gallardo has. It can be fairly common for these, and taxing all these electronic systems is the best way to spot it. So now that the car's running and settled into that steady idle, have a good listen to it, guys, before you go anywhere. There definitely should be no knocking noises and no valve ticking noises. The Gallardo can be known to use quite a significant amount of oil, and if a past owner hasn't kept on top of that, the engine may have run low on oil at some point, which can indicate big problems for you. One thing you can do, guys, is if you're looking at buying an EG car with the paddles rather than the manual gated box, is you can get what's called a Lara report published and a clutch snap report published. That's going to tell you a few things. Find out if the car has been launched before and maybe any potential mistreatment of the gearbox. And the clutch snap report is going to give us a readout of how much clutch life is remaining. Remember, second 50% of the clutch will always wear faster than the first 50% of it. And a clutch is not a cheap item. So if you're buying a car, you want to make sure it's got a good amount of clutch life left. In the manual car, gear changes should be a joy. It should seamlessly flow from one cog to the next. If it's an EG car, again, changes should be nice and slick. But one little advisory on that, guys. Remember, the e-gear system is a learning system wherein it learns the driver's driving style. So if the car has been sat, laid up for some time, or the car has been used in quite a lot of traffic, then what you might find is the first few changes are a little bit sloppy. Generally, a good few miles of enthusiastic driving should clear that out, and the changes should be snappy and precise. Now, if they're not, it could potentially suggest something else, and I would proceed with caution and maybe even a mechanic at that point. Now, to test the diffs, guys, we want to get off of those fast-flowing roads. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of time in your ownership to get back to it. Get the car into first gear. A big empty car park or parking lot is ideal for this, and feed in quite a significant bit of steering lock. Car in first gear, and we want to creep it forward slowly. Now, you might get a little bit of diff binding from the front or rear. That's normal. It should release quite quickly. However, if it is significant or you're getting any clunking coming from either the front or rear, I would suggest walking away, guys. Now, as you're driving along, what you should also do is keep an eye on that oil pressure. Now, at idle, as I said, it shouldn't dip below 1 bar. When you're accelerating, it should be producing between 4 and 6 bars. Any less, and again, it could just be a faulty sender unit, or it could be something a bit more serious. So go ahead with caution. Now, my final piece of advice is to enjoy the process, guys. Buying a Lamborghini should be incredibly enjoyable, and as ever, I'm always on hand to help. So if you're looking at a car and it's maybe got a problem you're not sure about, or you own one of these Gallardos, be sure to drop a comment in the comments below, and I'll try and help you out with that. But for now, good luck with finding your perfect Lamborghini Gallardo.